Welcome to ASP.NET Identity with Web Forms. Web Forms is not dead. That's the latest news coming up at 11. My name is Alex Louie. How's everybody doing today? What I want to show you today is how to integrate ASP.NET Identity tables to a current existing database, and as well as adding new fields to that database, actually ASP.NET users table. If you notice, I've already created my ASP.NET Identity Web Forms project with authentication enabled, and that's our first step. If you go back to the web config file, you will see that it has a connection string to default connection, and this is where it will create our ASP.NET Identity tables. If we go into SQL Server Object Explorer, you'll see that the tables have not been created yet. The database has not been created yet, so we have to actually register a user, and this will automatically create the tables for us. So let's do that first. So let me run this project. And once we run the project, we go on register, and we will put in our email, parttimeadjunct@gmail.com. I will put in a strong password. And then click on register. Once I click on register, the database itself should have been created. So if I right click here and I do refresh, you see the ASP.NET Identity table created there. And if we go into tables and I see my data is here. The first thing is, let me stop this project, is we really would like to move these tables to a current existing database. So let's say we have a database called New Project DB. And New Project DB has my product table, and let's assume it had other tables that you had created. The first thing you want to do is you want to do a schema compare between this database and this database, and that's pretty easy. So in order to get to the SQL Server Object Explorer, first of all you have to go View and then SQL Server Object Explorer, and then we're going to do a right click on the identity database that was created, and we do a schema compare. And this is all within Visual Studio, so that's the beauty of it. So now we have our source, which has the identity tables, and we do a target. We select target, we select the database, so I'm going to select the connection, and I'm going to browse through my local instance, and I'm going to go into projects v13 because that's where my products database is. So if we go into New Project DB, which is just a test database that I created for this particular example, I'm going to click connect, and then that should be fine. So I click OK, and once I click OK, then I can click on compare, and it'll do the schema compare for me. And if you'll notice, it's going to actually try and delete my already created table. You may have a couple of more tables that would like to be deleted, because what you're really doing is you're trying to sync up the source and destination so that the destination looks exactly like the source. But in our case, we really don't want to do that. What we really only want are the .NET Identity tables. So we're just going to grab these 6 tables and uncheck this and keep this checked to add to our current New Project DB database. Now all you have to do is click on Update, and it's going to say, are you sure you want to update the target? You say yes. It's going to do a schema compare, publish, and now if we go into SQL Server Object Explorer, you will see on the bottom, if I click on refresh, that our tables have been created. Great. The other thing we need to do is actually point our project to that database. Now if you're using an existing project, then you probably don't want to do this yourself because you probably already have a connection string that's pointing directly to it. So right now this is pointing to default connection. The other thing is if you are using an existing project, so let's say you're using another project and you only use this to create the identity tables, then it's pretty easy. You would just go into models and identity models, and where it says default connection, you just point to your actual connection string that you're pointing to, which is your actual database where your new project DB lies. But since we're using the same existing database, what I want to do actually is change this connection string to no longer point to MS Local DB, but actually point to my existing new project DB. So what I would do is I just right click, go to properties, and within the properties window there is a field that says connection string. So what I do is I just copy this and I will copy it directly into here. When I copy that in directly into there, it'll magically work and it'll actually create users within that table within my new project DB. So if I run this, click on register, and I will register as my email, parttimeadjunct@gmail.com. I'll put in a strong password. If I click on register, and voila, I have just registered in my new database. So if you look at new project DB, I right click on ASP.NET users, and there is my information. Now suppose that I wanted to add a new field, which is a first name and last name in my registration, and that's very, very easy. And remember, .NET Identity uses the code first approach, so we first have to add two fields to our identity models. In the identity model, you will see an application user class which inherits from identity user. Identity user has a couple of attributes, and this is actually inheriting all the properties and attributes from identity user, and within here we can add our new custom fields. You can also create a user profile class and include it in here, and then that automatically will create, you can create your properties in there, but for the sakes of simplicity we will just add our properties here. So if I create a first name field and a last name field, I have my properties available to me, but there's a couple of things that I need to do so that I can override the entity framework and have it allow to insert these fields. The other thing that you may want to do, is actually go into account and go into the register page. In the register page, you're going to notice that it has the email and the password and the confirm password. So within this page, you want to add your first name and last name fields here. So we're going to do that right now. What we're going to do is we're just going to copy these two fields, or HTML, so that now we have a first name and last name. So I will say text first name, and this will say first name, and then this will be text first name. We'll get rid of the text mode, and we will say that this is required and the first name field is required. So this is, the validator is going to be validating my first name field, and this is my label. Now we need a last name field, so I'm just going to copy this again. Okay, and we will say text last name, and this will be last name, and my text box will be text last name, and this will validate my text last name. So the last name field is required. So we updated our field in Register.aspx. We've added our properties here on the application user. Now we need to merge them together And where this is merged together on web forms is on the code behind in the Register.aspx file. If we go into the code behind, you will see a piece of code where it says create user click, which is the event. And here you're creating a new application user, an object. And currently we only have the username and email as properties, right? So what we want to add is the new properties that we added within identity model, right? Because identity model is actually contains my application user class, which inherits from identity user, and that has all the code to add a user. So not add a user, but just have their profile information. So what we'll do is we'll add a first name, which is the property that we're referring to here. Okay, and we will set that to our text first name dot text, because that comes from our register form, and then last name, and that will equal text last name dot text, which comes from, again, this comes from identity model. Okay, at this point you're almost done, but if we try and register a user just doing this, it's pretty much not going to work. So let's try and run this, and these are a couple of growing pains that I ran into when creating a user. So we run this, and let's say I want to create part-time adjunct. Well, we're using a different. Let's erase the email that I currently have. So if I view data here, I'll just get rid of this, delete this, yes. So we'll use part-time adjunct at gmail.com, and then I will put in a strong password. And then if I try and click on register, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's going to give you an exception. Don't try to add the fields directly to the database itself, because that's not going to work either. It's still going to come back with an error, because the identity classes use code first with the identity framework. So we have to use something called the package manager console and execute a couple of commands. It's not hard, so that we can enable migrations and have it migrated to the ASP.NET users table. So we're going to stop this, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the package manager console. How do you reach that? You go to tools, you go into NuGet package manager, and then you go to package manager console. The first thing you want to do is type in enable migrations, and this will allow you to enable migrations on ASP.NET identity tables and on the project itself, so that you can add columns or edit columns within it. So once you get this message here, then you're good to go. Now what we want to do is now we want to have it add our fields. Okay, first thing to notice is there is a folder called migrations. Currently you're not going to have anything within it until we create our migrations in the console. So let's add a migration. We'll just call this new fields. So it's add dash migration and then new fields. Press enter, and it will create a class for you which recreates the tables for you. Now this is where it gets tricky. You should not execute the update database command here, because if you do this, okay, what's going to happen is it's going to try and create all these tables again, and they already exist in your database. And that's the tricky part. That's where a lot of people end up getting confused, and I see a lot of confusion on the internet. So when you click on update, when you hit enter and you do update database, it's going to tell you, it's going to give you an exception and say there's already named an object ASP.NET role, so it'll stop right there. So what you want to do is you want to get rid of this here. you want to get rid of this here. You want to keep ASP.NET Identity users, because if you notice it has a new fields within here, okay? And you want to get rid of everything else but that. So I'm going to get rid of ASP.NET user claims, user logins, and all that. So I don't want them to be recreated, okay? Where it says down, leave that as is. Leave that as is. So if I save this, I really should only have my create table ASP.NET users and have all these my new fields within it, and it's going to have the first name and last name, okay? But the other tricky thing is do not recreate ASP.NET users. It's going to bark at you and say there's already a table called ASP.NET users on the identity framework. So what you want to do is you want to label this as _2, so that what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do like a temp copy. We will create ASP.NET users 2, and then we will rename our current one to old and rename this to the current one, and then we should be able to insert our new fields in there. So let's do that, and then we click on save, and over here we should run that command again. So let's do update database, and it will create that database for you on your new database. So if I refresh this, you are going to see ASP.NET users 2. Now, ASP.NET users 2 has the fields that you want. ASP.NET users does not. So what I usually do, and the way I got around this, is I take the ASP.NET users, which is the current one, and I rename it to old. It's going to create an update script, and then you just say update database. And then the one we named to 2 is we take the _2 out and we click on update database. And there you go. The old you can just get rid of. I'll just leave it there for purposes so you can see it. And now we can get rid of this here. And again, every time that you do an alter, it's going to create a new class within the migrations folder. Now, when I run this, it should just magically work. I can add my 2 fields, and it should write to the database. So if I put in my name, first name, last name, parttimeadjunct@gmail.com, then I do my super strong password, and click on register. As you see, I no longer get that error that I was getting before. So now if I look at my tables within my new project DB, I look at ASP.NET users, I look at view data, and then you see my first and last name there, my ID, and all the information has gotten populated within there. We can get rid of the ASP.NET users old table, so I can just right click and delete. I'll update the database, and you should be fine. So now I can stop debugging, and that's it. And that's how you migrate your old ASP.NET Identity tables to a current database that you're running, and then you can add your fields using the Package Manager console. I hope that this has been helpful, and I hope to see you soon in future videos. Thanks.